Suddenly, Aaron asks Simon what he is doing right now, and Simon answers he successfully restored the skeleton, so he looks at the next lecture's material. Aaron, with a straight face, tells Simon to stay behind after class, and when everyone leaves after the class, Aaron tells Simon to follow him. Aaron takes Simon in the open ground and says there are a few things he cannot stand, and one of them is the students who don't learn from his class even when they are willing. Simon apologizes, but Aaron tells him to pull out his skeleton, and as he does that, Aaron breaks his skeleton. Aaron tells Simon to store it in front of him, and when he does that, Aaron sees he is talented in restoration, so he says he'll teach him a skill ahead of restoration. Simon shockingly asks Aaron if he will not reprimand him for not paying attention in class, but Aaron asks what he is talking about and says this is an extra lesson. Aaron says it's a professor's role to provide additional lessons to the students who have achieved beyond the regular class, and Simon gets excited to know this. Aaron tells Simon to get into his position and doesn't make him stay any later at work than he already is. Aaron shows Simon a skeleton made out of the bones of a demon and tells Simon to watch closely the bones while he dismantles them. Aaron demonstrates bone piercing to Simon, an attacking skill using restoration, and shows binding skill by creating a bone prison around a squirrel there. Finally, Aaron shows Simon a defense skill through which he creates bone armor around his body, and Simon thinks it's cool. Aaron says depending on the Necromancer's capability, the skeleton can become their weapon, jail, or armor, and all the black magic skills he showed just now are the applications of restoration. These restoration techniques are taught in the second year, but Simon has already achieved outstanding feats in restoration, so Aaron will arrange these skills a little and teach Simon how to use them. Simon thanks Aaron, and Aaron says for now, the skill Simon can attempt to mimic is bone piercing, but before that, Simon has a habit he needs to correct in his restoration. Aaron explains the key to restoration is sending the skeleton in his intended direction, but Simon's restoration centers on the skull. In other words, instead of moving the skull-centered skeleton after it's fully restored, Simon has to exert his will from the start so that the skeleton will be restored at the desired location. Simon remembers Fear said the same thing, too, and thinks he could try this in a similar way to how he controlled the skeleton. Simon summons the skeleton to gather in front of him, and Aaron says his summoning is not terribly slow, so he tells Simon to move on to the next step. Simon dismantles the bones, and Aaron says restoration and bone piercing are two different skills. Aaron explains that bone piercing is an application of restoring force, so Simon should consider them totally different skills. Aaron suggests Simon should get into the habit of tilting bones when he restores because the sharp end digs into the enemy's flesh. Aaron shows that if Simon focuses the darkness on the bone in one direction, he can make it into a sharp blade. Aaron ties Simon's hands with bones and says for the bone that doesn't have piercing parts, Simon should think of it as attaching them to the enemy's body because that itself has a pretty decent binding effect. Simon starts the practice, and Aaron says Simon is still choking the enemy with the bones at this point, but since he can repurpose the destroyed skeleton as an attack, that gives him a new card to play. Aaron advises Simon to keep training to use this trick in actual battle, and Simon thanks Aaron. Aaron heard Professor Jane picked Cyclops hunting as the performance assessment, so he asks if Simon is going out to fight, to which Simon replies he is not because Malin is going, and Aaron thinks it's smart. Aaron says it's important to focus on supporting the teammate, and there will be a lot to learn for Simon. Aaron finishes the class, and when Simon goes back, his friends ask what happened and if Aaron hit him. But Simon tells them to calm down because it wasn't a punishment, it was just an extra lesson. Simon's friends think he must have been shocked that he mistook the punishment for an extra lesson, and Malin says it's fine as long as he is not hurt. Malin tells Simon to have a look at the potion, which Simon sees is going well, and Malin says it'll be complete after they simmer it for 20 minutes over low heat. Simon thinks they all worked hard on it, so he hopes it's effective, and Malin says this also gives them something to present during the elementary black magic class. They prepare the expected questions for tomorrow's presentation, but in the morning, after the presentation, Jane says they have one main damage dealer, one summoner, and two curse sorcerers, so they have a variety of mages, but the roles aren't. Jane points out that their combination of black magic lacks creativity, and even the unthinkable idea of placing the main leader in the supporting position. She is curious about what they are thinking. Jane says she would like to hear why they divided the roles like this among themselves, to which Malin replies that it would have been ideal if they could clearly divide the members' roles. They thought that defeating the Cyclops quickly and effectively was the most important goal. Jane asks Simon's opinion on this matter, and Simon thinks there must be a different answer that the professor is looking for. But in any case, it's the student protection period. Simon knows today's presentation is for getting feedback on their strategy, so he thinks he shouldn't be shaken and needs to focus on showing how good their teamwork is. Simon says he knows that their group lacks creativity in combining black magic, but safety is more important than creativity. Simon says they'll hunt the Cyclops more stably than any other groups, and in doing so, get high marks in their respective strengths to make up for the points they lose in creativity. Jane says if he says so, then they should move to the next point, that Kami is a student of hematology, and thus she will need to be taking charge of the attacks. But Jane sees that she has given up the attacking position to a catarology student, and is supporting with cursing, so she wants to hear Kami's thoughts. The group members get worried because it's a tough question, but Kami answers it's due to the unique nature of the Cyclops they'll be fighting against. When Jane asks what she means, Kami explains that the Cyclops have tough and firm skin and that hematic spells are more effective with physical damage, so it's not easy to defeat them with hematic spells. Kami says Malin knows how to use Dark Flare, a darkness elemental spell, so she thinks they can burn the Cyclops alive with Dark Flare. Jane asks what if a different monster is their enemy, to which Kami replies if that's the case, then she'll be the main dealer. Kami's group members are surprised, and Jane says she'll keep this answer in mind. Lastly, Jane warns Hayward not to chat with the students next to him during the class. After some while, during lunch break, Simon is waiting for Lorraine in the cafeteria, and when she arrives, everyone is struck to see her. When Lorraine asks if they have anything to say, everyone runs from there, and Simon feels Lorraine seems different from before. Simon thinks she looks a bit intimidating, but before entering Kizan, she is friendly. When Simon says it's been a while, Lorraine, in her friendly ways, says it's the first time they have seen each other since Landerstein and asks how he is, to which she replies he is good. Lorraine asks Simon what he told the girl who delivered his letter to her because that girl was making such a fuss, to which Simon says he just asked that girl to pass the letter to Lorraine. When Simon says she looks great in school uniform, even better than he imagined, Lorraine asks if he means she looks old, but Simon says that's not what he meant and she looked different in Landerstein, like a professional necromancer, but seeing that necromancer in school uniform is different. Simon tries to clear himself and asks if she understands what he means, but she starts laughing and says she is joking. When Lorraine asks Simon why he wants to meet her, Simon tells her there is a traitor in Kizan and tells everything that happened in the Forbidden Forest. Simon says this might be hard for her to believe, but Lorraine says she believes him and asks if he can explain what the cross looked like, which he saw in the forest. If he remembers correctly, Simon says the largest cross was in the middle, and a woman was sculpted on it wrapped in vines. Lorraine says it's obvious that the woman is Diva, the only goddess that the priests of Ifnel believe in. Lorraine tells Simon that Ifnel is the only college operated directly under the Pope, and like how Kizan fosters necromancers, Ifnel educates priests. Lorraine tells Simon that saintesses are considered the strongest in the Holy Federation, and they only select their members from the girls at Ifnel, and in turn, they hold all the power in the Federation. Lorraine furiously breaks the glass and says how dare a priest step foot in Kizan and asks Simon who else knows about this besides him. Simon tells her it's just him and Camibres who went to the Forbidden Forest with him, and Lorraine thanks him for telling her immediately. Lorraine says she will immediately report this to her mom and says it's a good decision on his part to tell her this. Lorraine thinks if what he said is true, that priest must be a high-level priest as powerful as a professor, which means every professor in Kizan is on the list of suspects. Lorraine says they might have destroyed the evidence or obstructed the investigation if he had consulted a professor. Simon is glad, and suddenly Lorraine says they should get going. But when Simon asks where, Lorraine says they are going to the Forbidden Forest. Simon gets excited, and Lorraine says they might find some evidence left at the scene where he witnessed the priest. But after going there, they are shocked to see there is nothing. Simon is shocked because it is the spot where the altar and cross should be, but there is not even a trace of fear, and the priests fight. Simon wonders how it's possible, and Lorraine says there is not even a single trace, which makes it more suspicious. Lorraine thinks the priest must be quite powerful, and though she didn't see the battle herself, she can tell from looking how thoroughly they managed to clean such a wide area. Lorraine thinks it's shocking that they planted the core inside to come into Kizan, even when they serve God, because she knows priests think the core is a force that denies God. Simon asks the question to Lorraine that if a person opens the core, then he can't use holiness as a priest, to which Lorraine answers it's right, and she doesn't know the exact mechanism either, but that is what the priests claim. Lorraine says holiness is a force that comes from believing in God, and darkness is the force of a crushed devil, and it's an undeniable fact that the two forces clash. Lorraine thanks Simon for cooperating with Kizan but says the problem is that the priest is a force to be reckoned with, so his safety is in great danger, and they don't know when they'll come after Simon. Lorraine tells Simon to take some time off and rest, but Simon says he is okay and he'll go on with his daily life like normal. Simon doesn't know if the priest saw his face or not, and if they come after him, that could leave evidence behind, too. Lorraine gets mad and tells Simon not to be ridiculous because even if they can get evidence, it's meaningless if it's in exchange for his life. Simon tells Lorraine to calm down and says if he takes a break from classes and does something out of the ordinary, the priest might start suspecting him, and if the guards follow him, he would stand out even more. Simon says it would make it obvious that he told everything about that day to the higher-ups of Kizan, and that's why they are protecting him. Simon says they are dealing with a priest who has infiltrated Kizan, and as Lorraine said, the priests made up their minds to come there and even open a core, which is considered a sin among the priests. Simon says Lorraine also understands that such fanatics might take unpredictable actions, so Lorraine understands. But she says if she finds any suspicious movements, she is going to get him protected even if it means limiting his freedom.